When the Project Connect North Corridor study first started, the first thing before us was trying to figure out what challenges are we actually trying to address through this study. So we started with the regional challenges and opportunities that were identified through the Project Connect system planning effort, and we carried those over into the North Corridor study. And that's what you see before you here. The first challenge that we were trying to address through the North Corridor study has to do with centers. Several years ago, leaders in our region and the community came together to develop a vision for how we should grow in the future. We know Central Texas is growing like crazy and will continue to grow like crazy. How should we grow in the future? And what they came up with was this idea of trying to capture as much of our future growth as possible, or as appropriate, into what are called activity centers throughout the region. Activity centers are essentially places where you can meet a lot of your daily needs in one place without having to get in your car and get on a highway. So these are places that within a very close distance you can work, there are jobs there, you can live, you can shop, you can get medical treatment, you can go to school, you can recreate, you can do all the things you would normally need to do in a given day without having to leave that center. And so there are lots of different kinds of activity centers of varying sizes. There are large regional activity centers like the area in and around downtown Austin. There are smaller activity centers like downtown Kyle. There are activity centers that have existed for a long time like downtown Round Rock. And there are some that are just emerging or just emerged within the last several years. So for example, also in Round Rock, the North University Boulevard area, where you have now all those institutions of higher education, a couple of hospitals, retail, you have residentials, all sorts of different kinds of housing, etc. You know, that was just ranch land not too long ago. So that's an activity center that's emerging. The Mueller redevelopment in Northeast Austin is another example of an activity center that was planned and is emerging. So the notion is that as we grow and develop into these centers, we need to make sure that these centers are connected, because let's be realistic, even though you may be able to live, work, play, go to school, do all of that in downtown Lockhart, you're going to need to leave Lockhart for some reason, whether it's to go to work or to do something else you need to do. So we want to make sure to the extent possible we can connect all of these activity centers in the region together. And so we set out to accomplish that as one of the challenges that we addressed in the North Corridor study. But we also have the core of our region, which is the area in and around downtown Austin. So not only do we need to connect all these activity centers together, we also need to connect them all, if we can, to the core of our region in and around downtown Austin. And the reason is because although there are great things happening all over Central Texas, there are jobs growing everywhere, things to do everywhere, there's still so much of an attraction to the core. It has a very large concentration of the jobs that exist in our core. There's lots of cultural and civic amenities there, entertainment destinations. There's a lot of reasons why most folks in Central Texas at some point find themselves needing to go in and around downtown Austin. So again, two of the challenges: connect the centers together and connect them to the core of our region. But of course we have constraints. We have physical constraints, we have resource constraints, and we have to make sure that as we move through this study that we keep our constraints in mind and address those as well as we can. The little picture there on the top right with those little red boxes, that's an aerial view of I-35 through Central Austin. And those red boxes are a lot of things that you may have to move or tear down if you wanted to expand I-35 just to accommodate traffic demand now and in the future. And these are things that are probably not going to move. Parts of the University of Texas campus, historic cemeteries, historic neighborhoods, things that you would find quite challenging to address that constrain your options in dealing with traffic on I-35. Now, there are efforts underway to try to use the footprint of I-35 that we do have a little bit more efficiently, and those are ongoing through Mobility 35. But this is just an example of how we have constraints that we have to consider in the region to addressing our transportation challenges. Obviously, congestion is a tremendous challenge. We are one of the most congested places not only in the country but in the world now, and it's getting worse every day. So in developing the tools that through this study we certainly kept congestion in mind, and we're trying to come to the community with solutions that would offer alternatives to congestion. And then finally, growth is probably our largest regional challenge and opportunity. We are the fastest, well, maybe among the fastest, if not the fastest, regions, growing regions in the country, and our rate of growth seems to be speeding up. So the challenges that we have today are going to get worse faster if we don't do something to address them quickly. So these are the challenges and opportunities that we set out to address through the Project Connect North Corridor study. But where do we start? Project Connect evaluated large regional travel corridors throughout the region, so going northwest from Central Austin out to Leander, going to Bee Cave, going all the way down to San Marcos, southwest, east out to Elgin, and then of course north out to Georgetown, radiating out from here in Central Austin. And what we found is they're all terrible. We could probably justify some measure of high-capacity transit investment in any one of these corridors, but of course we can't do them all at once. We have neither the time nor the resources to do that. We have to prioritize. So what we did was we started with those regional challenges and opportunities that we just talked about, and we looked at data that corresponded with those regional challenges and opportunities. So we looked at how many activity centers were in each one of these corridors that would need to be connected, how many trips there are from this corridor to the core of our region. We looked at growth in that particular sub-corridor, that corridor. We looked at what constraints exist in that corridor. We looked at a number of other factors that corresponded with those challenges, and based on that, we prioritized which corridors we need to study right now. And the two that really jumped out for us were, of course, the North Corridor from Georgetown, Round Rock, Pflugerville into Central Austin. And then you see this green box here is what we call the Central Corridor, because there are so many challenges just getting around Central Austin that it merited being studied all by itself. And for those of you who don't live and work in the North or Central Corridor, we will eventually get to these other corridors, but these two are where we felt, based on the data, we needed to start. This is just a little bit of more information about why the North Corridor jumped out on top. One that should be apparent, one that should be apparent just based on this graphic. You can see all of these orange dots. These orange dots represent those regional activity centers that we discussed, and just looking at this, you can see that there's several large activity centers that exist or are planned here in the North Corridor from Georgetown to the largest regional activity corridor, regional activity center, which is here in Central Austin. So just the number of centers, you see several of them listed here. Congestion. 6 of the 100 most congested roadways in the entire state of Texas exist in the North Corridor. And there's a number of other things that we looked at. The growth in both population and employment is just tremendous. The one in the middle was probably the most striking to us. By 2035, it's estimated that nearly 60% of all jobs in our entire region will be located in that North Corridor between Georgetown and downtown Austin, which means that folks in 2035, even if they don't happen to live in the North Corridor, odds are that they're going to work in the North Corridor because that's where 60% of the jobs will be, and they're going to have to travel there. So we have some tremendous challenges now, and it looks like we're going to have more challenges in the future, and so that's why it really jumped to the top. So the question now that we'd like you to respond to on this online forum is, are these the right challenges to address in the North Corridor? This is what we sought out to address. Is this headed in the right direction? So please make some comments and then move on to the next section.